Hello and welcome to HPA Global Insights, where we'll be interviewing experts from the dietary supplement, nutritional ingredient, and overall natural health food industry. Please like, subscribe, turn on that little notification bell, and comment below. Now on with the show. Hi, welcome to the show. Today we got a great show, and our good friend Drew Campbell is joining us. He's the CEO and founder of GPNi, which is Global Performance Nutrition Institute. Drew, what's up? How's it going?
I'm going good, Jeff. How are you, mate? How's the weather in Austin, Texas?
It is hot and humid right now. We just got out of a week-long wet spell. Now we're in humid, hot weather. But it's good. Sunny.
Okay, well, as Robin Williams once said, it's hot, damn hot.
So you're in Shanghai.
Yes,
how's the weather there? Rainy and
rainy. Well, today's 26 degrees Celsius, so not too bad, but it has been quite hot recently, and the rainy season hasn't yet begun, but it will soon.
Yeah, they flipped it. Yeah, they'll flip the switch usually around the FI Asia time, FI Asia Expo. They'll put the rain on for everybody in Shanghai.
Right.
So we're here today to talk with Drew about sports nutrition in China. This is a huge topic. We're going to try and keep this to about 20 minutes or so, but we'll have to do another episode perhaps. So let's dive in here and just talk about, if you're a company, you're a global company, you're looking at China, a sports nutrition company, you want to jump in there. First step obviously is, can I get my product imported? What kind of basic upfront hurdles do I have?
Okay, well, there's usually a large misconception, and we were talking about this earlier, Jeff, in regards to China. Most, and I do mean most companies, and I'm sure you've advised thousands in your time, it really depends on the type of product that you're trying to get into the country. So there's a massive misconception is that, you can't import to China, you need a blue hat. I mean, everyone thinks that because they've gone on Dr. Google and they've realized, we need a blue hat, and they're impossible. But it's not true. And it really comes down to what type of product. Is it considered a food? Is it considered a sports nutrition? Or is it considered, a vitamin / capsule, and therefore it's in a very difficult category. So it is very possible to import, certainly not yourself. And it's certainly something that I prefer not to do myself. And we did do that for 10 years in our original business that we exited in 2017. But it is possible, and it is black and white regulatory aspects, but a big part of that also being China is relationships and getting people done. Hello, Amy, in the background there.
So you got the paparazzi there behind you.
I've got the paparazzi taking some photos and videos.
Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar with the blue hat, it just let's just jump into that quickly. I'll just kind of clarify. It's a registration for what China calls health products. That China doesn't use the term dietary supplement legally in their laws. They're called health food products. And you need a registration for, like you said, Drew mentioned, 2-piece capsules, soft gels, tablets, things like this. In general, those type of things need to be registered if you want to sell in the brick and mortar traditional commerce in China. And China does have its own regulatory system for sports nutrition. So there are a number. Again, we're not going to dive in too deep into these details because there's a lot of them, but there's certain ingredients that have been approved and they have standards like creatine and glutamine and HMB and a few other ones, and protein, etc.
As long as you don't mix them together or not mix them together, or you put too much B6 in something, and it should be 5 milligrams and not 25 milligrams. But there is some regulatory that still doesn't make any sense, but there is regulatory. There wasn't in place 6 years ago.
Yep, exactly. So in general, just to keep it simple, if you can put it in your mouth, chew it up and swallow it, or drink it as a liquid, or that, it may be considered a food in China. It would be a little bit easier to get in the market. Um, but yeah, so let's move on from the regulatory stuff, because that's kind of a nightmare.
Sure.
Channels. So, okay, let's say let's just use some examples. Okay, I got a protein powder, plant-based protein powder, whey-based, whatever it is. Okay, that's basically a food. I can take that and kind of navigate the regulatory hurdles, probably with a little bit of help. And now I want to sell this. So where am I going to sell this in China?
Well, there's
In terms of channels,
many channels to sell, but this is, I think, the greatest misconception most brands have is they're focused on channels, and most brand owners outside of China think there's only one channel, Tmall. There is no other channel but Tmall, and we have to be on Singles Day, and we have to be making $1 billion on Singles Day. So firstly, there are more channels here than anywhere else in the world online. Tmall is not the only channel, and that's a massive misconception. JD is increasing its footprint as another alternative, but then there are many others. There's Pinduoduo, which is also growing extensively, which is a little bit like a Groupon or group buy type of activity.
sure.
And then there are many other channels, whether it's direct channels or based online, et cetera. And the other misconception is a big misconception, if they're not importing, and because they think they cannot import, is there's only Tmall Global or cross-border, which is the worst channel to be in most of the time. So there's a lot of misconception about the channels in China. So people need to understand that there's a lot, and you don't need to put all your eggs into one basket. Diversifying your channels can be good, as well as focusing potentially on channels that are not oversaturated. Because if you're in channels that are oversaturated and you're not a big brand, then you're going to be spending more money than makes any financial sense to get that conversion rate. And it's, at the end of the day, it's about conversion rate, not just about being on the right channel.
Yeah. So for channels, let's look at kind of the two basic channels anyways would be traditional commerce. So brick and mortar, that would be for products that you could get it in the country as a food, or you went and got that blue hat registration or whatever it is, and you can sell it on a shelf in a store. And that's one channel. And then the other channel will be the cross-border, the social e-commerce selling. That's just a whole big lump. There's the Pinduoduo and Douyin, and just so many different channels to do that in. And then a little bit, maybe not completely, but unique to sports nutrition, there's a bunch of trainers in China at these gyms that are selling sports nutrition kind of under the table, if you will, for a commission, working with a distributor or whoever, and getting that direct sale that way. So are those kind of the three, if we keep it kind of simple like that, those are the three major channels we're looking at?
Yeah, three major channels. Yeah, I mean, in regards to things, yes, there's a little bit of offline, but largely it's online within those three areas.
And in your opinion, what do you think? In terms of sports nutrition is still quite small in China. The potential is not even being realized at any point or level. But where do you think the mass amount of sales are going through? Would that be through the e-commerce kind of electric?
Well, Tmall. I mean, although companies shouldn't only focus on Tmall, most of the sales still are on Tmall. A little bit of a side business that we started about 6 months ago with a friend's big data agency. His data agency it works with all of the big alcohol brands, luxury, fashion, et cetera, and pharmaceutical. His company, but he's never worked with wellness, sports nutrition, nutrition in general. So he didn't know what categories to look. He didn't know what brands to look. So we created a joint venture in regards to understanding the big data, understanding what's really going on. And one thing, as you well know, Jeff, there is no real black and white reports from these large channels of what is being sold, how much they're being sold for, what products, what flavor, etc. So you need an outside agency, which is generally termed as a big data agency, that control the internet and set up algorithms to bring back that data, and then you can put that data into categories and segments to understand it. So sure. It was very, with that, we did it for a number of brands, and we also spent 6 months going back up from historical data from 6-7 years ago to truly understand what channels are where most of the sales are from. And yes, Tmall is where most of the sales are from, but only in the last 3 to 4 years, there's been a massive hit in sports nutrition on JD. And on the other side of things, Amazon in China has gone directly the other way. It's lost a large footprint, at least in the sports nutrition and wellness and even baby formula on these other categories we looked at. So Tmall is kind of stabilized and growing a little bit. JD has been shooting up like crazy, and Amazon has lost a very large footprint as far as the larger channels. Oh, and Pinduoduo has increased substantially from nothing, because it's only new, to 5 to 10% of the market, which is quite substantial for something that's only begun in a very short period of time.
Yeah. So in that kind of framework, so if you're a protein powder company, you're sitting offshore somewhere in North America, Europe, or Australia, wherever, and you want to sell, there's a couple options there. One is you do it yourself, which is very expensive, big investment there, or you just find a partner distributor. How easy do you think it is for companies to do that? Or what would you recommend to a company to do, to kind of try to do it yourself, or just find a distributor and just kind of let them handle everything?
None of the above. It's impossible to do it yourself, literally impossible. So don't even consider that. A misconception I had as a young entrepreneur coming to China: it's easy. If I could make $1 for every person in China, blah, blah, blah. It's very, very difficult. There's so many complexities, more complexities here than any market on the planet. And you and I both know that better than any people and any foreigners. So I would not do it yourself. And secondly, I would not just allow a distributor to take your brand. And generally, even if you wanted that to happen, generally that's not going to happen now anyway, because the distributor is usually just a channel flipper, meaning they just will flip your brand into channels. And they're only going to be able to do that if your brand is well known. People in China don't buy products, they buy brands. And if your brand is not well known prior to it coming to China, or even in China, because of the Great Firewall, and that firewall extends from a language perspective, as well as a social media perspective, and as well as the internet control mechanisms, you need to localize your brand. So just having a channel is not a complete answer. And in fact, that's the last thing. This is the first thing a lot of companies look at. Oh, what channels should I be selling in China? That's the last thing you should be looking at. And the second last thing you should be looking at is distributors. The first thing you should be looking at is how do I localize my brand, and how do I have people fall in love with my brand and my products? Because if you solve that right, the distributors will come to you. If you solve that and your brand equity is high enough and valued enough, then the distributor and the channels will come to you, because Chinese will want your product. But if you don't focus on that key point, which largely most don't, then you failed before you've even begun. No matter if you've got the channel, no matter if you've got the distributor.
Yeah,
Because it's all about conversion rate.
Yep, completely agree. So going back, I mean, we both ended up in China around the same time. So going back 15, 16 years or so, that's how fast and how quick China changes. So when I arrived, as did you, you could really literally show up with a foreign brand from an industry that was, sports nutrition or dietary supplements. The industry was not super well developed at all, and it was kind of a mess. And you could show up with a brand like, this is made in Germany, or this is made in America. This is made, I mean, back in the day, America was the big one. And people just bought it because it was American. It was supplements. It was, the quality perception was there. It has to be good. And it was just easy. And now it's, those days are gone. You can't just show up and say, oh, I'm a foreign company, everyone will want to buy it. That's, we're
oh, absolutely, Jeff. And it's, you've hit the nail on the head. And that's the big failing point, that a lot of companies outside of China just don't realize how quickly China changes, evolves, how quickly the environment, the marketing, the branding. I would say now, and this is totally 180 degrees different to as little as 5-6 years ago, where Chinese companies had no idea about branding. They just didn't have a clue. And I would say now that Chinese companies have surpassed all Western companies when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to branding, surpassed. But there are many in there that the younger generation is very creative, and they're using technology and social media and live streaming sales and KOL, key opinion leader, and the whole 9 yards, and great packaging. And it's, you can't rely on, I'm a famous brand from Germany or America or England or whatever. You can't rely on that any longer. Before, it was 100% of the equation as far as brand equity. And now it's better than nothing, most definitely, but it's about 10% of the equation. It's not the entire equation. Everything needs to be localized and brought in and rebranded to suit.
Definitely. So with that in mind, another very big difference between, if we just put these two big hunking categories, the West and the East, and East being China, of course, is COVID. So, how China dealt with the COVID issue, and, we can just use America, but it's similar around the world. China, you were there during some of it. You were actually out of country, if I remember correctly, and kind of trapped to some degree in Australia while that happened, right?
Well, so I was officially not here for any of it, meaning the when it really went down. Every year, except for the last year and a half, I go home to Australia, where I'm from, country Victoria, north of Melbourne. I go home to see my family, usually in Chinese New Year, because our office is closed. It's easier for travel for children's schools, so it's just easier for us to travel during Chinese New Year versus Christmas. So we went back, as we do, and we're in Australia for 1 week, as people may or may not remember that COVID-19 begun just before Chinese New Year. So we went back before Chinese New Year. So we were in Australia for 1 week when the news headlines started popping up left, right, and center about Wuhan originally, and then a couple of days after Wuhan, then Shanghai got shut down, and then a week after that, all flights were cancelled. So even if we wanted to come home, we couldn't, and we decided to stay in Australia and wait it out to see what was happening. So we did that, and it dramatically affected our business, to say the least. We were in a dire straits because we were doing offline education. So all of our courses in China, in Thailand, Taiwan, Korea, we were opening the Korean market in March 10th. We were due to fly to Korea and begin. We had our experts from America and Canada flying in, and that got cancelled. So I was in Australia for 2 months, and then came back to China, though, in March 5th, just before the quarantine procedures begun. So we actually, touch wood, we've actually been very lucky in regards to not dealing with much of the COVID hazards as far as lockdowns and things like that. So we've been pretty fortunate, I have to say. Yeah, and largely, there was a lot of news reports in Australia, and I was freaking out coming back to China. But then I talked to many friends, and it was locked down, but it had some freedoms as well. It wasn't people weren't in Shanghai being nailed into their houses, for example.
Well, you mentioned some things we'll touch on in a second, which are important, and COVID affected your business like a lot of others. As an industry, the health product industry in general did really well and continues to do well through COVID because of vitamin D and vitamin C, antioxidants, and just general health, people at home trying to take care of themselves, et cetera. But sports nutrition was another story. That one segment of our industry really got kind of beat up because all the gyms were shuttered and closed down. And then people, were like, well, let me just get some dumbbells. I'll work out at home. And then supply chains dried up. There was no treadmills. There was no bicycles. There was no, but in terms of time, so in America, we're 16 months into this COVID thing and we're still not out of it. We're getting to the, kind of light at the end of the tunnel. China, if I remember correctly, kind of draconian lockdown probably for a couple months, and then things just kind of rolled back to normal. How did COVID affect sports nutrition and the gyms? Were they shut down, and how long? And what did you see?
Okay, so the gyms in Shanghai were shut down through because they were getting. I mean, it's kind of was good timing in some degree during Chinese New Year, because a lot of things, as you well know, Jeff, get shut down during Chinese New Year anyway.
Yeah.
So the gyms were being shut down. So they got shut down from mid-January. We got back March 5th. They were still shut down. And I believe March, April. I can't quite remember. But it was either the end of April or beginning of May, the gyms opened again. So about midway through January to May, the gyms were shut down. And when they opened up again, and this continued for a long time, you would have to get your temperature checked and you would have to show your green code. For those that don't know what the green code is, it's a QR code that you are being tracked everywhere you go, and you've got to show a green code. If you've shown a red code, it means you've been in a close proximity of someone that has had COVID. And if you have a red code, then you can't go into places and you need to go and get a test. So you, at the very beginning, when the gyms opened up, you had to go in with a mask.
So that code, the codes, the green and the red code, that was all through your cell phone, was that run through like WeChat, or what was that, a separate thing, or what was that?
So the green code is run through Alipay.
Alipay. Okay. Yeah. So you had to show your cell phone to the, if you want to go in the grocery store, the gym, get your temperature checked and all that stuff. So there was definitely some barriers, but by and large, it didn't. And then, like we said earlier, most sports nutrition sales are going through digital kind of e-commerce anyways. So did you see much of an effect on sales of sports nutrition?
So on the e-commerce side, it was interesting. And I think this is like many factors where just China's so different. From when we got back up until about May, I'm not sure exactly when, maybe the end of May, there could be no express delivery into your complex. So they couldn't knock at your door as they would always do and deliver something. But again, because China's quite different in a culture and infrastructure, they set up outside every single community these delivery zones, and it was very systematic. So everything would be getting delivered to the front gate. So there would be no interaction with the express delivery people. So e-commerce just continued. In fact, people were buying more things, I think, because they were bored. And China has such a robust e-commerce and express delivery system America is excellent too. Australia is like really behind because it's such a big ass country and a small population and people are spread out everywhere. It's just not the same infrastructure.
Sure.
So it's just really bizarre though, at the front of every community. I mean, it was like these massive tents where everything was being delivered and it was just, people coming in and out all the time with deliveries. But the spread of the virus was next to nothing because you couldn't come out of the community, or you didn't want to come out of the community very easily. So you would never interact with people at those drop zones.
Then let's just kind of go back a little bit because I forgot to bring up just a quick topic on, if you're going to go into a new market, obviously you want to get a taste of it and visit the market. So part of that is going usually to an expo. Now, oddly enough, sports nutrition is not a huge category in China. It's growing and it's sizable compared to smaller countries, but compared to the US or anything else, it's just not even close. But they do have 3 separate fitness shows that do have sports nutrition. So we've got, 3 major ones. What are those 3, just for people to keep, if they wanted to come and visit, what are those shows?
Well, there are more growing as well, by the way, because like even some of the pharma or ingredient companies are now wanting to attract more diversity. They're wanting to grow and they see, yes, this industry is not huge yet, but it is growing. And the culture of fitness is growing and people see that. So there's a lot of investment, local investment going into this industry. And because of that, then you've got a lot of other industries that are trying to bring in their trade shows. So there are more and more trade shows wanting to do this. Yeah. But the top 3.
Well, I should clarify. What I mean is the kind of exclusive fitness shows. There's FIC and FI Asia, HNC. There's a bunch of expos that all have, sports nutrition topics, and sports nutrition companies will show their goods there. But so yeah. I'm just talking about like very specific fitness shows.
Okay. Yeah. So the specific fitness shows at the moment are in no particular order. The IWF, which is originally based in Shanghai, China Fit, originally based in Beijing, and FIBO, that their office and headquarters is in Beijing, but the show is based in Shanghai. So the top 3, and that's FIBO China. Yes, somewhat affiliated with FIBO Germany. Yeah,
so the people are probably familiar with that. So the IWF and China Fit are kind of homegrown domestic shows, and FIBO is kind of is a joint venture with Reed Sinopharm. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and those are fitness shows. Nike's there, and competitions, and they're kind of like mini kind of Arnold Classics, if you will, at some degree, in terms of they have bodybuilding and CrossFit competitions and all that stuff.
Absolutely, and a lot of fitness equipment. I mean, sports nutrition is certainly something that is significantly grown since these fitness shows have been going for over 10 years, China Fit being the first one. And there would be like 1 or 2 sports nutrition brands for many years, and then it's like 3 or 4, and now IWF there was 40 to 50 brands. It was just insane. I mean, compared to say 5-6 years ago when there was only 1 or 2. So it's dramatically grown. But at these fitness shows, where they make their money from is fitness equipment, gym sales and things like that. So still a big part of the show is the fitness equipment side, and sports nutrition has grown a lot though in the last few years.
Yeah, so that would be a good call if you're a company that's not in China yet. Definitely plan on going to one of those shows and checking things out. Now let's move forward and hit our last topic, but just backpedal a little bit. You had mentioned when we were talking about you in Australia and COVID, and things were shut down, you had some experts coming in. You were talking about your education that your company GPNi does for sports nutrition and fitness. So let's talk a little bit about that, and also your backdrop there, ISSN. You're affiliated with them. Just explain a little bit about what you guys do.
Okay, so I'll go back a step, and then I'll explain what we do. So a big part, as you well know, Jeff, in this industry, is there's been a lot of misunderstanding on nutrition, partly to do with the difference between traditional Chinese medicine and Western understanding of nutrients, the macronutrients and the micronutrients. So there's been a large misconception, and we felt when we run, as some of the listeners don't know, and you certainly do know, we founded the very first health food store chain called World Health Store, or WHS, and we founded that in 2007 and exited that in 2017. And we were selling many different. That's why I know a little bit about this topic of nutrition and sports nutrition. 10 years in China is like 1,000 years anywhere else in the industry. I've got the battle scars to show it. But the big part we found is, the Westerners, the foreigners that bought our products, and the returnee Chinese that bought our products, there wasn't any education needed. But with the local Chinese, the trainers or the general population, they greatly misunderstood things. They thought protein powder is going to make them look like Ronnie Coleman, or the women, it's going to turn the women into men, etc. Or creatine is going to make all of their hair fall out. There's just so many misconceptions. So we soon realized that education was something extremely important, more so important in China than anywhere else. Originally, we intended to sell more products. I mean, it wasn't originally an intention to have it as a standalone company. And we were doing that as a company because we were doing retail in our World Health Store and in our locations in Beijing and Shanghai. We had to do that as customer service. Someone comes in and say, I want to lose fat. Well, how do you lose fat? Well, increase your protein intake, lower your carb, what's your caloric intake, take an isolate over a concentrate, et cetera, increase your good fats, blah, blah, blah. So we would have to teach our staff to do that. So a big part of it was education. When we exited the company and not knowing what we were going to do next in the world, I mean, we were thinking about going back to Australia. In fact, we'd almost, packed the bags and looked at immigration. But one thing led to another. We didn't go back to Australia. And we were already talking to the ISSN prior, and we re-engaged. But we wanted to look at doing it differently and not as a business marketing tool to sell more products, but as a standalone education business. Because at the time, and actually still to this day, there isn't any quality sports nutrition education certification company in really Asia Pacific, but specifically China. So that's what we did. And the ISSN is, for people who don't know, the International Society of Sports Nutrition. They are the pioneers of the pioneers when it comes to sports nutrition. All of the major research studies are from the ISSN, and they really stand out amongst the pack compared to other nutrition certification companies, because a lot of the research is created by them. So yes, you may have a NASM certification, you may have a precision nutrition certification out there, but if you really drill down where they got that education from, it's sometimes a copy and paste from the original research. So we really like working with them, Joey, Doug, and Rob and Bill, and we work very closely with them all, and it's a great thing. But they aren't an education company. So what we do is we create the courses, and we work with the teachers, and we're the tip of the spear, and they're the examination, the certification, et cetera. So when I say is we're the Global Performance Nutrition Institute, the institute is like a college, and we teach people now online. Mostly 99% is exclusively online. And one of the certifications we offer is the ISSN Sports Nutrition Specialist certification. which is the main certification we have.
Yeah, I mean, that's education was the first thing, I ran into when I entered the China market, wanting to sell supplements, working for a very big US company. That was the thing that was holding two things: regulations and education. So that's a huge task that you guys undertook, and it looks like you're doing really well with it.
Yeah, it's fully localized now. We've been running. We started bilingual, so English translated into Chinese, but the last 2.5 years is 100% localized. So we have local experts teaching everything.
And in other markets, too, you've branched out into other parts of Asia.
Correct, Korean language. We were doing so we when we had to cancel the offline Korean one, they were a little bit reluctant to agree on an online version, but it actually went very, very well. And we had 30 Korean students on the first one. So in Korea, and once we launched the new online platform and everything is ready in English language, it will be also in Japan. So we have a Japanese partner ready to go, and that will be translated into Japanese language as well. So a big part of what we do, and why we call the Global Performance Nutrition Institute, is we allow access to experts, access to research and the cutting edge research within sports nutrition for people of the globe. And that barrier usually has been technology and language, but we shouldn't have that be the issue when it comes to students wanting to acquire this fresh knowledge. They're not going for their PhD doctorate. This is a quite high level sports nutrition education, but it's not scientific PhD doctorate level. So allowing the language allows access to people of the world to access the experts and the research.
Yeah, and before we wrap this up, what we said earlier was we're talking about channels. One of those was trainers, and I think when I was in China, one of the problems I saw is a lot of these trainers just we call like bro science or something, and people just kind of off the cuff saying, yeah, you got to take this much protein, or you got to take creatine, or you got to do, not really knowing what they're doing in a lot of cases. So kudos to you guys, and a lot of brands should be thanking you for helping to educate a lot of these trainers that are going off with some solid knowledge and helping people out with their fitness goals. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're a long road ahead, but it's quite surprising even to me, even in Shanghai, when we ask, I don't go to all the courses, but when we do, you ask the students, who uses protein here? And there's a handful of people who uses creatine, and there's like 2-3 people in a class of 30 when we do offline. I mean, when people know that the sports nutrition market is growing and in some cases growing at 25% per year, last year a little bit more growth than previous years, and then you look at the population. But then what you really need to look at, that there is only a fraction of the population. We're talking about the elite level fitness trainers. Even not all of them are using sports nutrition, right? Let alone the general population. Now it is growing, but it is so untapped. It's incredible. And when they get it, and there is a lot of, in the Chinese government, 5-year plans, as you well know, Jeff, there's 2 major changes that are coming into play in the next 5-year plan. And one of them, increasing the lifespan of all Chinese by an average of 1 year. So that fits into nutrition, fits into wellness, education, exercise, sports. Obesity is part of the next 5-year plan to fight obesity amongst there as well. And when it's coming from the central government, it's a whole different level of focus and marketing and propaganda on the media. So there is going to be significant growth still, but yes, it's still at an infantile stage, even though it's significantly bigger than some other markets.
Yeah. All right, Drew. Well, let's we're 40 minutes at this point.
I knew we'd ramble on more than 20 minutes, mate. We got you
tried.
and I, and we don't even have a beer between us. Now, if it was a beer, we'd be going all night.
Yeah, we try to keep this one down, but no, that's just not possible. So we'll hook up for we'll hook up for some other ones, and you have a podcast. I'll jump on that one.
Absolutely, tea with Drew. I look forward to it. Now, you have to get your Chinese tea. I do an actual tea ceremony on Tea with Drew. So you'll have to set up your tea there.
Okay, will do. I'll go. Yeah, we've got two different big Asian grocery stores here that I can grab stuff. So that's cool. All right, man. It was great to see you. Your day is already started. What time is it? About 10:30 in the morning there, Thursday.
10:37. Yes.
Yeah. So you have a good day, and we'll catch you next time.
Okay, mate. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to HPA Global Insights. Please like, subscribe, and share with your colleagues. Any questions or suggestions, email us at info@uschinahpa.org. This channel is operated by US China Health Products Association, which is a nonprofit organization. Please consider joining the association and supporting its global endeavors. Your support is very much appreciated. Until next time, take care.